And now I know you're all here to hear John. So first I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lara Roketenetz. I just slaughtered your name. I'm so sorry, Lara.
No, you did good.
Lara is the manager of the field station, the Martin Field Station at Bath Nature Preserve. We've done a lot of programs together over the years for kids, for teens and adults like this one. I'm going to have her tell you a little bit about what they have going on at the field station, but so she's a wonderful resource. She does programs for area school kids, whether they're in grade school or high school, is support for the University of Akron students who are doing field studies at the field station, and then also does these programs for the community. So for all ages, whether kids or adult, and that's part of this series, or I wouldn't say series. This is a one-time, but this is part of what we do together. All right, so let me turn it over to Dr. Lara.
Thanks, Teresa. So I'm so excited. I have to say that this week has felt a bit normal again, which is great. My AmeriCorps member, Danny Jacobs, is here today too. So the field station is in expansion mode. We actually have 2 of us now that are doing programs. And this week we were back in the classroom with the STEM middle school on Wednesday, and with Our Lady of the Elms on Thursday, and having we were in the classroom kind of like the way that we're with you today. And then having a program today, it feels, we're starting to get back into a little bit of normalcy here, where we get to see our people and to talk to kids about nature and kind of explore, how we can get out there, separately, but together to learn more about nature and why it's so important to our own ecosystems and to our good health and our mental health and all of that stuff. So it's been really nice. It's great to see you all here today. I wanted just to give you a quick update. We don't have dates necessarily for stuff yet, but we're going to be releasing small group format nature hikes in February and March. And so the topics for those will be the Owl Prowl, the Woodcock Walk. So those will be on a first come, first serve sign up basis. And they'll be in groups of 8 visitors and 2 instructors to go out for some night hikes at Bath Nature Preserve. So stay tuned, kind of watch our Facebook page for the announcements regarding those events. And then in April, we'll have a garlic mustard pull. In May, hopefully a grassland bird hike. So some fun things coming up. March is a really big month for Bath Nature Preserve. So we will be on board as John and his son Alexander and the Bath Township trustees do a ribbon cutting on a solar system walk, which is amazing. It's beautiful, incredible. It's going to be a really nice addition to the park. The same day, which that's March 20th, we're going to be opening up a self-guided hike like we had in the fall. So in the fall, we had Fall into Nature. We had 30 signs hidden throughout the park that you had to go find on a bingo card. So in spring, we're doing that as well with Bath Township Parks, and we're calling that the Spring Spin Around the Parks. So it'll feature 30 new animals and plants to learn about around the park. So that's something to stay tuned for. And March 20th will be like an open house kind of day at the park where you can pick up your bingo card and come explore the solar system trail and the spring spin. And John and I will, along with his son Alexander, are releasing a book this year about the birds of Bath Nature Preserve. We're very excited. We've been working on it for a long time. So it has 80 of the most common birds that you would find at Bath Nature Preserve. It's very fun, lighthearted. It's a field guide in name only. It's more like a fun way to educate kids and families about birding and why we should get out there and be looking for birds together in the parks. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully it will be ready around that March 20th date as well. So we'll have copies for Bath families to pick up for free, and then any of the rest of us can purchase a copy. They'll be $20 or less. So it's exciting. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce John Landis. So John is the most incredible person that lives in Bath, that does so much with Bath Parks and the University of Akron Field Station. He was awarded our Volunteer of the Year award a couple of years ago. because he's so dedicated to, helping us educate folks about nature. He also just recently won, was it a Rotary Award, John?
Yes.
A Rotary Award for his volunteerism. So he does these programs for us. He helps out at the observatory. He takes photographs around the park and keeps the Facebook page and the Instagram page for Bath Parks up to date. He serves on Bath Park Board. He has helped with the bird book. It's just really, he's a dynamo. I get so much more done with John in my life. It's great to have a partner like him to work on these fun projects with. So we're real excited for him to do his photography program. I feel like this is the either the third or the fourth time we've done this program. And this is by far, the nicest number of folks that we've come join us for this, because it's a great way to join in on a cold day. So if you have questions, if you could just drop them in the chat while we're going. John said he'll happily answer them throughout the presentation. Teresa and I will be monitoring that chat so that we can kind of chime in. We'll also have hopefully time for questions and answers at the end. And then also John has put together a handout that we will give you at the end in the chat, or you can email Teresa to get a copy of it emailed to you. That gives you some of the tips and tricks written out so that you have it for the future. So, all right, John, I think we're ready. And if you want to go ahead and share your screen after you say hi, that would be great.
All right. Well, hi, thanks for coming. And thanks, Laura and Teresa, for setting this up. It's nice to have so many people here today. I'll just share my screen, I think. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, now. Okay. Slideshow.
Perfect.
Do you see just one screen now?
I do.
Okay. Now it's weird. Oh, there. Okay, so welcome. Today I'm going to talk about introduction to nature photography, and most of the photos today are mainly taken in this area. I'll have some examples from other areas. There'll be a lot of examples with iPhones and also some examples with a normal digital camera. So hopefully it give you a lot of good inspiration today for pictures to take in the area and all year round. There's examples from spring, summer, fall, and winter. The first picture, for example, was taken in January, just a couple of years ago with an iPhone 7. So, and that was in Bath Park. So today, I'm just going to talk about three main things: what makes a good photograph, some important camera terminology, and then some of my favorite photography techniques for better photos. All the pictures were taken by me. We'll focus mostly on photography techniques, this topic. So what makes a good photograph? So for the Bath Parks and the University of Akron, the photography is used to educate, inspire, and create awareness about our local animals and environment. So it could be a deer in the fall, in the spring, or the winter or summer. So yeah, I've taken thousands and thousands of pictures, over 100,000. This is probably the most popular photograph I ever had. And it was taken with a trail cam, a cheap trail cam. And it's probably the lowest quality picture I ever posted. And why is that? Because it tells a story. Most people don't know that there's actually bobcats in this area. So this photograph created a lot of excitement and stirred up a lot of engagement. So one of the important topics is your photograph really, if it tells a story, it really creates a lot of engagement with the viewer.
John, can you use your mouse to circle the bobcat to make sure everybody sees?
Oh, yes. So this is it. This little bobcat, it's not a high quality photo or anything, but this photo, it's amazing how much excitement it caused. So even the Ohio Department of Natural Resources was excited about it. So another thing, photography, as we know, it can be very subjective, but good photographers have one thing in common, and that is their work inspires us. A good photograph will make your viewers engaged and care. How it makes them engaged is done in many different ways, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Like, for example, this is a little killdeer, and it's a baby that runs through the park, and people have dogs that are unleashed, and I want people to know that there's baby killdeers that run through the park and not to have their dogs running unleashed. So I care about unleashed dogs, and hopefully some of my photography will create awareness about these birds. So if the reaction to a picture is somebody wishes they could come to that location, then I know I'm doing something right. For example, if they want to go to Stan Hewitt, or if a picture makes them want to go on a walk at the nature realm at sunset, that's another way to make a good photograph. Ansel Adams, probably one of the most famous photographers, said there's really no rules for good photographs. There are only good photographs. Photograph actually means, in Greek, it means to draw with light. And some of my most popular photos are very colorful pics. Like this example of the Bath Pond at sunset. This was taken a few years ago with the iPhone 5, and that was very popular. So many people know when they see a good photograph, but they can't really explain why they're drawn to it. There's a lot of intangible elements. So that's what we're going to talk about today. What really are these techniques that you can practice to get inspiring photographs? But before we get into these techniques, let's review just some of the common camera terminology. These are the most common terminology you really should know. The focal length, the aperture or f-stop, the shutter speed, also known as exposure time, and ISO speed. So in nature photography, these moments are very fleeting, like this mink. It was just popped his head up for a second, and if I hadn't been prepared and known how to operate my camera, I probably wouldn't have gotten this photograph. Your pictures don't have to be always 100% perfect, but it helps to have high quality photos. Like the National Audubon Society, when they have their big camera photograph contest, they judge their pictures based on technical quality is only 30%, originality is 30%, and artistic merit is actually 40% of how they judge their submissions. Here's another example of an animal that's very fleeting. This coyote stood still for 1 second and then it was gone. So you have to constantly be practicing with your camera settings. Bucks, coyotes, minks, beavers, many birds, they don't stick around very long for photos. They don't like to pose. So as I would say, after 40 years of practicing photography, luck is sometimes a matter of preparation, meeting opportunity. So I'm going to talk about some of the very important items of what you need to know, the most basic. So the first one is focal length. That's basically the length of your lens. A small lens, you get a wide angle like this 18 millimeter picture. And as you get a longer lens going up to 300 millimeters, you can maybe even see Bernie here. Zoom in. So as you get more focal length, you also need more light, and it's harder to hold the lens without a tripod, but you can have a lot more versatility. And then the next item is aperture. This is really important. Aperture, or the f-stop, controls how much light reaches the sensor of your camera. So as I said in the beginning, photograph means drawing with light. So choosing the correct amount of light is one of the most critical settings you will need to understand for good photographs. Basically, the aperture opening in the lens, it lets in the light. So if you have, it's basically, think of it as an area of a circle if you double the diameter of a circle, you'll have 4 times the area. So it also affects your depth of field. So if you have a shallow depth of field, you have a very big opening. You see this picture on the left. That's the opening of the lens. And as you make the opening smaller, you have a longer depth of field. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. Also, lenses that have big, very big aperture, they also tend to be more expensive. And you can see this picture on the right. The aperture is this opening here, this orangish area. That's a very large aperture, and then a very small aperture on the right. Here's an example of a large aperture. So at nighttime, you need a lot of light, so you need a very big aperture. And one of the drawbacks is you have very shallow depth of field. So every year, well, they used to do a salamander walk because they were doing salamander research at the field station. So every year they would do a salamander walk in the dark on a rainy night. So it'd be very low light conditions, and you need a very large aperture to get a fast shutter speed to catch things like this is a little crayfish. You can see how his fingers are out of focus, but the crayfish is in focus. And this newt, for example, his eyes and his body here is in focus, but his tail's already out of focus. That shows how shallow the depth of field is in this, using this lens. So you have to focus in the dark without a tripod. It takes a lot of patience, but there's certain situations where you can't use a flash. Your subject's moving quickly, so it's important to understand your aperture. Here's an example. That was a large aperture. This is an example of a small aperture opening. So this is an f/22 opening. And you'll see in this picture, the foreground is in focus all the way back to the waterfall. All this is in focus. And then you actually get the motion of the water because there was a long shutter speed.
John, can you address the camera you were using for these? Somebody asked if it was a phone or a camera. I'm assuming this was a camera.
This is actually with a camera, yeah, with a digital, yep. So this one has a big depth of field with a long focus. In this case, sometimes you want to focus at night with a small aperture, and this shot uses a small aperture and a 30-second shutter opening. And when you get a long shutter opening, you can get light trails. For example, here are boats in the water. Another example for waterfalls is exposure time. So the length of time your sensor is the length of time you let light on the sensor inside your camera. And the amount of light that reaches your sensor is proportional to the exposure time. So for example, 1/500th of a second will let in half as much light as 1/250th of a second. The picture on the left, that was the shutter time was 0.6 seconds. And then the picture on the right was 0.02 seconds. So it was a very fast shutter speed on the right and a very long shutter speed on the left. And you can do that to get nice waterfall effects and where the water becomes all blended together.
Hey, John.
Yep.
We have another question.
Okay.
Can you explain how exposure time affects color saturation?
Oh, exposure time affects color saturation. Well, usually I take my photos. A lot of camera settings have the setting for different times of day, and that actually is the setting I use for getting the best colors and the best color saturation. Like your camera actually has settings for daylight and shade, and if you're taking pictures at nighttime. And but then you can do in post-processing if you want to play with your saturation. You can use that. You can increase saturation using a photo editor. So I've done it that way.
And John, one more question,
Uh-huh.
sorry. The app that you use on your cell phone, I can't remember the name. Can you
Oh,
share that?
that's Pro HDR. Yeah, Pro HDR X. In the last setting, camera terminology is ISO speed or film speed. When I was growing up, it was film speed. It's a measure of the photographic's film sensitivity to light, or nowadays it's the sensor's sensitivity to light. So this picture kind of causes confusion with people. So the picture on the left was taken with my big camera, which has a 16, and I had it at a 1600 ISO speed. And these pictures were taken at the same time. And then on the right here, you can see the screen of my camera. And I took this picture on the right with my cell phone. So the cell phone had an ISO of 80, and the big camera, you can see the lens here. I was actually aiming, there's actually a raccoon up in the tree. I was taking a picture of the raccoon. Because I had a high ISO setting, my camera was very sensitive to light. Now, also, if you look closely, you can see it's 1/5 of a second. So I had the shutter speed open pretty long. And so you can do a lot with ISO and that's just think of it as a sensitivity to light, which is very important at low light conditions. This chart is actually really good because it puts all these, what I just talked about, together. So aperture, you can think of on the left, f1.4, you have a very big aperture, but you have very shallow depth of field. As you make your aperture opening smaller, the f number is bigger, but you have a very, very deep depth of field. And then shutter speed, you can get a person running at say 1/1000th of a second, but as it gets to say half a second, someone running would become a blur. And then ISO, that's a sensitivity to light. ISO 50, you have no grain. And when you get a really high ISO, you get a lot of grain in your picture. The newer cameras are getting better with the ISO and less grain. So you can get really good pictures at really dark conditions. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the more interesting stuff, some actual photography techniques. So number one rule, a very simple concept, is to emphasize your subject. You got to remove check your background, make sure you don't have a lot of clutter in your background. This shot, for example, has no clear focal point and too many distractions. So if you get rid of all the distractions and really focus on your subject, you can have a lot more interesting picture. Here's another picture. Another way to emphasize your subject is called framing. A lot of people don't pay much attention to sparrows. This sparrow is a lot more interesting when he's framed by these frozen branches here. Another way is called spotlighting. So I had a lot of fun going on the salamander walks because I got a lot of chances to experiment in the night using a lens with a big aperture. So in this case, the salamander walk, we're all talking about salamanders, but I like this picture because really the real subject is Scott, the salamander researcher, and your eye is kind of drawn to Scott, not so much the salamander. Another way, for example, this person is framed by the trees in the forest, and also having a bright blue jacket helps them stand out at the opening to a forest. So another way, emphasize your subject, is to simply fill your frame. For example, the subject is framed with sunlight from behind and zoomed in close to fill the frame, which gives a more interesting effect and brings you into that person's world. So second tip is create visual energy and movement. As you can see in the picture on the left, there's just a very slight panning motion. I'll get to that in a second, but basically I was moving my camera lens with the heron. And herons are good because they don't flap their wings, they glide. So the water was a little bit of a blur, but the heron was still in focus. And then cattails or grasses blowing in the wind kind of gives an effect of visual energy. Here's another example of panning. So I was tracking the zebra while he was running, but the zebra, because I was moving my camera at the same pace as the zebra was in focus, but the background was out of focus. And you can do that, like we have usually in February, we have a sled riding event. So you can practice with sled riding, you can practice panning, or you can go to a skateboard park and practice panning because, for example, the skateboarder on the right is moving. His whole body is still relative to the background, and you can pan along with him. But this takes a lot of practice, but you can it's fun to do once you learn how to do it. So another way is creating energy. These pictures, you can get the effect of the feathers blowing in the wind. The egret was actually nearly hunted to extinction because it was used its lacy feathers were used in ladies' hats. And actually the egret is now the symbol of the National Audubon Society. It led to the creation, efforts to protect the egret led to the creation of the National Audubon Society. And so these photos kind of help tell that story and give you kind of a sense of its beautiful feathers on the egret. Another way I showed earlier was capturing motion at a waterfall. If you use a long exposure setting, like this was a 2-second exposure, you can get everything else is sharp and in focus, and then the water becomes kind of silky. This was Blue Hen Falls nearby. And also another way capturing movement is actually birds or animals taking off or jumping. Like so, when an eagle jumps off his perch, is a good example of capturing motion. Or you can actually capture the anticipation of motion. So like these chess players were playing in the park. You see his hand, and everybody's kind of focused on what's about to happen. The picture on the right is a heron. They get all coiled up and make very quick motions and catch fish. So they're fun to photograph. Another very useful tool is leading your viewer's eye into the scene. So like both these scenes, you have a trail or a path from the foreground leading into the background, and it kind of engages your eye, brings you into the scene. These are scenes like here's O'Neill Woods, a foggy path into O'Neill Woods. Here's a path going into a black forest. This is a stream at the North Fork of the Yell Creek, leads you down the creek into the woods to the sunset. On the left, the path leads to subjects, and you may wonder what they're talking about. Or you can put the people in the foreground, and then your eyes kind of wander along with them and see where they're going. So another technique is using water as a mirror. Water creates beautiful effects when there's no reflection. I mean, when there's no wind and it's very still. A lot of times in the bath parks, the bath pond is actually a very good spot because it's surrounded by trees and it tends to be very still at sunsets. At sunset and sunrise, there's a period of time called the golden hour, which are it's the hour right after sunrise and the hour before sunset. I'll talk a little bit more about this later.
Hey, John.
Yep.
Just real quick, if you would have taken, I was just trying to explain how that app works in that it like stitches together the different exposure times for the different parts. So if you would have taken this as a normal picture, these trees over here maybe would have looked more black, right? So the fact that you have it Yeah.
It's called HDR, which is high dynamic range. So yeah, it uses different settings. It'll stitch together 3 to 5 settings, so you get different exposures. So you can get a really good depth of field also when you use HDR.
But there's free versions of those HDR apps too that you can
Mhm.
try, right?
Yeah, they're free, and some are like 99 cents. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, actually, this picture was probably taken with a cell phone. This one here is a bath pond. Bath pond is there's often, yeah, you can see the pond. There's like trees all around, and it tends to be very still. And the water in the pond is very dark, which is good for reflections. This is the little garden pond, which is near the bath pond. This was in the morning, a foggy morning. And these, the heron or the egrets, they like to hunt in the garden bowl. This picture was taken in the garden bowl here, and you can get down really low. It's really good to get at eye level with the animals. Again, here's a frog. You can see his little reflection here. Okay, another technique is getting in close. It's important when taking pictures of people and animals. Otherwise, depending on what you're trying to do, because if you're too far away, their facial features tend to disappear. Like you wouldn't, this picture on the right, you wouldn't be able to see the features in the kids' faces. This was on at another chill on the hill when we actually had snow. I think last year, last 2 years, it hasn't been snowy enough. But you can get a lot of fun pictures at the Chill on the Hill event. And then, you know, getting in close on the deer, you can see texture in this, in the fur, and the expression in their face. And of course, the snake, you know, it's a lot more interesting when you get a real close-up look. This is a dog-veined leaf beetle. Like a lot of people would just walk right past a beetle and not paying any attention to it. But if you get up really close, you can see really beautiful colors in the beetle. And then how about the eyes of this little gnat ogre? This is a teeny tiny little gnat that lives in the nature preserve and has these massive eyes. So it's kind of fun to catch. Here's an example of cropping. You know, this picture is not really that dramatic or anything. There's a lot going on. You see Josh with a bag of garlic mustard and Laura just standing here. But if you crop it, you know, maybe it may be more interesting if you're trying to understand what's going on in the picture, and it tells more of a story of Randy guiding the students on the mustard pool. Here's another example of cropping or getting in close. So here's a very uninteresting picture. There's a bluebird here. Note that my shadow is pointing towards the bluebird, but this picture is not very interesting. So, but if you crop in and get in close, it's much more interesting picture. The bird kind of is just above the horizon here. It makes a nice effect. Another example is called, when you're getting close, you can, it's called a bokeh, or some people call it bokeh. It's the aesthetic quality of the blur produced in out of focus parts of an image. It's a way light, the lens renders out of focus points of light. In this case, actual leaves act as a lens. The leaves in the tree canopy create these little out of focus points of light, and creates a really beautiful background for this mourning dove.
Sorry, one more question, John.
Yeah.
So people are asking if you are cropping like by zooming or if you are cropping in post-production. And also I just want to give you a time check. It's 1:40. So.
Oh, okay. I think I'm good because I'm already through the first 2 subjects and half of this subject. So yeah. Yeah, another example of bokeh, like the trees, the leaves actually causing bokeh. This is a really neat example because during the partial solar eclipse, these are actually, this is the solar eclipse because the leaves in the tree, the little everywhere where the leaves were very close together, it caused like a mini lens. And you could see these are all examples of a solar eclipse that were reflected on the ground.
I don't know if other people saw that, but it was awesome and weird to experience in real time to
Yes.
see the light shadows look like little crescent moons. It was so cool.
Yeah, so it shows you can use a canopy above you as kind of like make neat effects from the light. Another example, like I like to do on frosty early mornings, is if you're pointing into the sun in this case. Usually I point away from the sun, but if you point into the sun, you can see nice little prismatic effects, all these little colors. That's like on really frosty mornings when the sunlight is really low, you can get this bokeh effect. Normally when you see bokeh, it's used with artificial light sources, but when you're in the park, you need to use natural light sources. So you can use the sun and sun going through trees or crystals. So another technique is engaging the eye with repeating patterns. People are naturally attracted to patterns. It's part of our ability and biological need to organize our chaotic world. Repetition can also create harmony and balance, adding structure to a composition as well to create order in a chaotic scene. So you can kind of experiment around with this, but in this case, you know, the lines in front of the goose are kind of were in focus and the goose was out of focus, but it creates kind of an interesting effect.
Hey, John, I'm sorry.
Yep. Oh.
I don't know that we answered the question about the zooming in. So are you zooming in
Yeah,
or
sorry.
are you cropping or both?
It's a little bit of both. It depends if I use my, depends which camera I use. You know, if I'm using this, for example, I can zoom in. And if I'm using my cell phone, I generally would just crop using post-processing. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of examples of objects repeating in nature, and they're kind of pleasing to the eye. For example, berries, poison ivy, tree, this, forgot the name of it. Okay, but anyway, this leaf in the fall, it shows up in the fall and it always makes a really beautiful color.
Is it burning bush?
Yes, exactly. I think it was, yes, burning bush, yeah. And then these are oak leaves in the garden bowl. I just thought they made a neat pattern. I thought that'd make a neat puzzle or something. So another point of photography is find a point of interest. Interesting photographs have interesting things in them and they need a visual point of interest. So for example, a large barren landscapes, sometimes less is more to create a solitary or mysterious mood. This is kind of the opposite of getting in close. You know, in this case, being far away and having one solitary character is more interesting. In this case, you have repeating patterns, but it's kind of broken up by a splash of red. These are all frosty grass. And then you have a little red bush, which creates a point of interest. Okay, this is one of the most well-known methods of photographic composition. It's called the rule of thirds. It's one of the first things that budding photographers learn about in classes of photography. And it's a basis for well-balanced and interesting shots. So basically, the rule of thirds is to imagine breaking an image down into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. So you have 9 parts. So you have 9 grids or 9 sections. But the focus points are where these grids intersect. So in this case, the subject, his eye is close to this point. Where the bird, he's close to this third of the camera. Studies shown basically that people's eyes, they naturally go to one of these points and go to the center of a shot. So it's a natural way, more of a natural way of viewing an image. And you'll notice this in a lot of photographs. People don't just put everybody right in the center of the photograph. They actually shift them off center a bit. And that's basically the rule of thirds. Is main point of the rule of thirds is don't put your subject exactly in the middle. Usually it's more interesting for your eye when you're off center a bit. And also putting the landscape close to a third makes the photograph more interesting or pleasing to your eye. Your photo editor usually when you go to crop, it usually puts in the lines for you and gives you an idea where the thirds are in the camera. But you can do a lot of experimentation. Rules are meant to be broken. It doesn't have to be exactly a third. Sometimes just putting it a little off center makes it more interesting. Another technique is using wide angle lens and create depth. You can do this a lot with cell phone cameras. Looking up always is interesting. Like in landscape photography, you can create a sense of depth by keeping all the different elements of the image in focus. Like in this case, the front of the image is in focus, all the way back to the background is in focus. So you use a small aperture, and cell phones usually have a small aperture. That's why cell phones can take a lot of really good pictures nowadays, especially with landscape photography. If you're using a normal camera lens, you may want to use a tripod because the lens speed may be pretty slow. There's an example of using a wide angle lens to create depth. So this was at f13, a very small aperture, and you see the subject in the foreground was all in focus, and so is the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is, of course, a huge expanse, so everything was in focus here. Okay, so the last rule, our last tip is time of day and lighting. All times of day have different lighting effects, so getting to know how to use your camera depending on the time of day is really important. Golden hour, some call it the magic hour, is a period shortly after sunrise or before sunset when the light of day is redder, more orange, softer than when the sun is high in the sky. So it makes really good mood in the photos. So depending on what you want to shoot really affects the time you want to go out and shoot. So if you want to get good mood pictures, you want to go out really early in the morning. Here's an example of golden hour, the light's coming in almost horizontal, so it creates nice shadow effects also. Creates a nice soft color. Also in the morning, you get sunbeams a lot of times. You can have fog and sun coming in, and sunbeams will make really pretty pictures. Or you can make, this is golden hour in Lake Erie. Get a lot of nice, this also was a long exposure, so the water is a little more wispy or silky looking. There's also a time of day called blue hour, and blue hour is a period of twilight in the dawn each morning, right before sunrise, and it's also the period right after sunset. So in that case, the light in this time of day is much more blue, and you get rid of all the reds. So this time of day, the pictures can be a little more, if you're trying to get a more serene feeling or mysterious feeling. So depending on the time effect you're trying to create. Of course, switching colors, switching black and white or color, it can dramatically change the mood of your picture. So this is a really important thing to keep in mind. The location of the sun has a dramatic impact on your photo. So this picture on the left here, I took that at 7 in the morning, 7:06, facing directly into the sun. And it's not a very interesting photo. So I walked 12 minutes later, I walked to the other side of the eagle. And now I'm facing west and the sun was to my back, and it creates a much more pleasing picture. Also in the morning, frost, you can see a lot of frost in the nature preserve, and the lighting is always really soft. So you can have a nice effect. This is something, actually a work in progress. I'm still working on the blackbirds. They come back really early in the spring. Like there are actually some I don't think left this year. But if you have a very still cold morning, you can get the blackbirds smoke like this breath. This picture isn't in focus enough, so I'm not satisfied with it, but it's a very interesting effect. But the birds, birds love to sing really early in the morning. And so you can usually get really nice pictures of birds singing, like this blackbird on the right. The blackbirds and sparrows, they tend to sit still in one spot and sing really loud. So they're usually pretty good posers. Another very important topic is what I call catch light. It's the light source that causes a glint or bright spot in a subject's eye. My son has been drawing since he's very artistic, and even when he was very young, he knew to put, somehow he naturally knew just to put a little glint in the eye. Here's a picture he drew of Chief Logan, and adding that little sparkle in the eye, it gives life to the subject. So example, here's a blue jay. It doesn't look, it just doesn't look quite right. Its eye is black, and the blue jay just tilted his head just a tiny bit, and he gets a little sparkle in the eye and brings the whole bird to life. If there's no light in the eye, I rarely post pictures of it. It's a very subtle point, but it's very important. So you can see the chipmunk and squirrels, they all have a little bit of light in their eye. Okay, I can lead you down the path. This is a point where we would normally be walking outside. And I would tell you, the biggest point is experimenting and practice. Just like anything, the more you practice, the better. This is time where we'd be walking outside. Fortunately, we can't do that today. So maybe we'll do it again another time. And before we go, I also wanted to let you know, so we're on Facebook at Visit Bath Parks and also the University of Akron Field Station. And then Instagram is at Bath Parks. We're also on iNaturalist, which is iNaturalist Project, University of Akron Field Station, and also the North Fork Preserve. And that is it. So any questions?
Thank you, John, so much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Really, really good. So I think if you want to actually stop sharing your screen, we can all see each other, and then people can just, I think people can just unmute and ask a question, or if you want to raise your hand and I'll call on you, that's also fine. Whatever is easiest. If you have a question for John, this is a great time to do it. Also, before we do questions, just in case people have to leave, I want to let Teresa know that, to go ahead and tell you about a little photo contest we're having with a prize. You're on mute, Teresa, still. Nope, you're still muted.
Oh, she's muted.
You're still.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. We are hoping after this presentation, what you're going to do is want to go out to the parks. So Bath Nature Preserve, where Lara and John are, the Metro Parks, Cuyahoga Valley. We have beautiful parks all over this area. We want to encourage you to go out and take pictures and then email them to me. You get a great shot. We'd like to share it on the library Facebook page. I think the field station might share some photos as well. But if you email them to me, and my email is tmunka, so it's TMUNKA @akronlibrary.org. Everyone who sends me at least a picture, we're going to enter you in a drawing to win this wonderful book. It's called World of Wonders in Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments. Let me see if I can try to pronounce her name properly. Amy Nezuhukama Tahil. This was Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year. It is not a photography book. We have a lot of photography resources, and you just had one. This is a book on, it's all nature essays. So the author has lived in various places around the country and has found refuge in nature. And these are hard to describe, wonderful essays that each essay highlights an animal and her relationship to it, and compares it to people in different situations in her life. So it's a nature journal, it's a snippets of a memoir. It's a wonderful book. So we're just going to draw one winner out of all the entries. The only other thing I need to tell you is they should be sent to me by February 7th. So if you email me an entry, we will enter you in the drawing. Okay, let's turn it over to questions.
Oh yeah, one last thing too. I'm having a challenging time uploading the file. So it's not giving me an option to do it from my computer. It's making me do it from Google Drive, and it's not linking to Google Drive for whatever reason. So I'm just trying to think of, Teresa, what's the best way to get people this handout?
It's okay. I have it emailed to me. I will use the links that I have from the program, and I will email it out. It may not be today, it may be Monday, but I will make sure you all get a copy of it.
Great, thanks. And your email is tmunka@akronlibrary.org, right?
Yes.
Okay, I typed it in the comments. All right, great.
Yeah, if someone wants to message me, they can on Instagram, or, they could do that too.
I have a question.
Mhm.
When I was looking at some of your pictures, like with the sunbeam coming through the trees, the forest trees, or the
Yes.
fog, my question has to do with exposure. And would you talk a little bit about overexposing or underexposing? When one meters for a DSLR camera.
Oh, yes. Actually, I think that picture I took with a cell phone, that one, the one in the forest. Yeah, some pictures I do, like you can get what's called blown out pictures. Like if the highlights, you lose all the highlights, so you don't get very good pictures. Like I show one example of like a dark-eyed junco that was blown out, as I would say. But I still like it because it was had a glowing effect. But yeah, that if you don't have the right exposure, you start to lose the details in your picture. And I think that's what you're getting at, the metering and knowing exactly where to put. Most cameras have a histogram on them. It's called a histogram, and it's on the, you can look at on the screen. I mean, cell phones don't do that, but most cameras do. And it's kind of a matter of learning how to use your histogram, and usually if there's usually like a curve, and if it's all shifted to one side or the other, it's a really good indicator that your metering's off, and you want to put it kind of in the middle. I mean, that's a very, very general answer, but yeah, I mean, most cameras they're really helpful nowadays with the metering. And most cameras, you can also set your camera for if you want to do, if your lighting is inside lighting, or if you have tungsten lighting or fluorescent lighting or incandescent or sunlight or shade. Most cameras help you with that. The setting on the camera does that for you already. So okay. So It's 2 o'clock, so I think it's already.
Anybody have any last minute questions for John before we go?
Laura, you had a handout, you said?
I
That's
did.
why
I
you were
put
having
one-
trouble uploading?
I got it in the chat, I think.
Oh, okay.
I put it in a link to Google Drive. I think it's in there. So hopefully everybody can see it. And I'll type my email address in the email one more time, and Teresa's.
Oh, you're talking about the handout that John did, right? That's what you're,
Got it in the chat. Yeah, hopefully they can. Hopefully
I can just send an email to everybody.
That's good.
Why don't I do that just to make sure they don't get it in the chat?
That's great. And then I did put our email addresses in there again. So feel free to reach out. We love talking with our friends and constituents. So please drop us a line if anything should come up in the meantime, and hope to see you at some more of our programs that are getting back onto a normal schedule in February, March, April, and May. And hope to see you out in the park taking pictures here soon. John, thanks a million, as always.
Thank you, thank
I
you.
learned something new every time. So it was great. Thanks a million. I appreciate it.
And thank
You're
you to
welcome.
everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really appreciate it. Well, I'll send out an email with the tip sheet.
Mhm.
And that way you'll have my email on it as well. Please send us pictures, have fun.
All right. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone.
All right, no more questions. Bye, everyone. Have a
Bye.
good
Thanks,
Bye.
Teresa. Thanks, John.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Teresa, you gonna close it down?